All right, folks. Arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion. Who are we talking about? Obama. What else? And his administration. How many times have we heard this from the U.S. Court system and mostly from the U.S. Supreme Court? But we have a judge's ruling saying that the IRS Obamacare rule is just that, arbitrary, capricious, and abusive discretion. And the state that was the first to file suit over this rule regarding subsidies, and we had the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma on when he was filing this, is Scott Pruitt. He's back with us, a victorious Attorney General. Mr. Attorney General, welcome back, sir.
Steve, glad to be on your show, and it is good to join you to discuss victory.
Yeah, well, tell us what victory means for the state of Oklahoma and for all of us as it relates to maybe even what it means for this rule in Obamacare in general.
Well, as we've talked about before, Steve, this is a very consequential ruling by Judge White. I mean, it's a victory for rule of law, first and foremost, because as he said in his opinion, he's just simply fulfilling that which Congress passed. Congress said that the subsidies that are issued under the Affordable Care Act should flow and be issued only through a state exchange. And the reason that was established that way, Steve, as you know, is that the federal government, Congress, and the administration wanted to incentivize the states to set up these healthcare exchanges. And the only way they could do that is through what they normally use, money. And when 34 states said no to the establishment of these healthcare exchanges, despite all these monies being offered, the administration had a problem. And the administration did what they normally do. They instructed their agency head, in this instance the IRS, to disregard the law. And it was arbitrary, it was capricious, and it was an abuse of discretion because the statute constrains the IRS from doing what it did. It said it was going to issue the subsidies in all 50 states, irrespective of the language of the statute. And as such, that means the penalties that are assessed under the statute against businesses that are noncompliant, and also the enforcement of the individual mandate is really tied to this matter as well. So when this judge, Judge White, in our proceeding said that what they did was unlawful, it was a victory for rule of law, but it was a victory also for making sure that the federal government, the IRS, doesn't disregard the plain reading of the statute and try to use a pen and a phone, as the president has talked about, to change or alter statutes after the fact.
So where does it go from here? Does the government appeal? Does the Obama administration appeal, and it continues through the courts?
They've already indicated that they are in fact going to appeal, and will go to the 10th Circuit. And as you know, we've had two different circuits dealing with this already: the D.C. Circuit and the 4th Circuit. And
they ruled differently. Yeah,
they ruled differently, and our district judge cited or issued a ruling that was consistent with what the D.C. Circuit initially ruled, which is that the IRS action was unlawful. What's interesting right now, Steve, is that our case, in light of the D.C. matter going en banc, it's going to be argued to the entire D.C. Circuit. In fact, I think the briefs have already been filed this week. That's going to be argued in December. That the potential split of circuits could come out of our case here in the 10th Circuit. If the 10th Circuit affirms our case, it will be contrary to the 4th Circuit, which may give the impetus to the Supreme Court to take this thing up sometime in 2015.
That would be interesting. Let me ask you about irony. Dick Morris has a brand new bestseller, and it's called Power Grab, Obama's Dangerous Plan for a One-Party Nation. And he writes, President Barack Obama, the former constitutional law professor, is at war with the Constitution. I mean, that's very true based on the court cases that he's lost and his actions and what this case proves. Kind of ironic, huh?
Yes, in fact, but what's even more ironic about it, Steve, is you go back and look at his comments as he ran for president in 2008. He spoke very much about the abuse of executive authority from his perspective. He talked about the signing statements that have been going on for some time, how that was an abuse of executive power and that executive orders, etc. But yet he has done that. He likes to come out and say, well, I have less executive orders than President Bush and President Clinton and all those folks maybe combined, or whatever he says. But it's not the quantity of executive orders, it's the quality of the executive orders. It's his instruction to his agency heads to go out and disregard the plain reading of a statute. This was a case, and I really love the way the judge put it. There's nothing political about his decision. it's all about what the statute says. He's fulfilling the law as passed by Congress, and we all ought to care about that, and that's the reason it is such a victory for rule of law.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations and kudos to you for being out front on this. And I'm sure we'll speak to you again, sir, as this progresses and hopefully does stick when the Supreme Court says that this is the case. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Have a good day.
All right. That's Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma, Scott Pruitt. And interesting because there have been two circuit courts that have gone opposite directions on this, and we'll get to the bottom of it, but this is a big victory. All right, folks, we're coming back with more of the Malzberg panel, which will be next right here on the Steve Malzberg Show. If you keep it where it is, only on Newsmax Television.
History calls it a miracle. The 1980 13th Winter Olympic Games were in full force in Lake Placid, New York. Months earlier, the Soviet troops had invaded Afghanistan, and President Jimmy Carter was threatening to boycott the Summer Olympic Games scheduled to be played in Moscow. But all U.S. Olympic hockey team coach Herb Brooks was thinking about was winning games. His team was the youngest hockey team to ever compete in the Olympics. In spite of their age and inexperience, only two teams stood between them and Olympic gold. The first was the mighty Soviets, whose team consisted of seasoned world-class players who just a year earlier had soundly defeated the National Hockey League's all-star team. The last time the Soviets had played these Americans in an exhibition game, the Soviets dominated 10-3. Sports commentators openly remarked that the only thing that could keep the Soviets from winning the gold would be if the ice melted. But the Americans, led by their captain Mike Eruzione, had other ideas. As the game got underway, the Soviets quickly scored, and by the end of the second period, led 3-2. A little after 8 minutes into the third period, Mark Johnson's goal tied the game. And then with just 10 minutes left to play, Mike Eruzione fired a shot past his defender to give the Americans the lead. The last seconds of the game tell it all.
Is there. The puck is still loose. 11 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Silk. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
For Newsmax TV, I'm Bill Curtis, and this is an American moment.